Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, I'm so excited about our guest today, Mr. Craig Fry. He's such a fantastic man. He's got a great perspective on men's ministry and discipling men and helping men become the leaders that God has created them to be. And one of the things he mentions, he actually starts talking about men's ministry in particular and talks about once a month pancake breakfasts in your ministry. Breakfasts in your ministry. And so I thought we could start, it's a great, segue conversation. So I thought we could start today with Josh, what is your favorite way to eat pancakes, or do you have a favorite restaurant that serves pancakes the best?
Okay. The best pancakes come from my wife, Lena Wooten. She can make them. She uses this imported Mexican vanilla that is like, I don't even know how she smuggles it in, but man, is it the best pancakes ever. But there is a little place I like my home pancakes, but there is a little place in Nashville in the Berrywood area. We call it Berrywood area. It's actually where a lot of studios are in this one little block area of town. Like some of the biggest records that have been done, like there's Blackbird Studios, there's several studios there. And there's a place called the Funky Griddle. Funky Griddle, and it's like hibachi, but you make your own pancakes right there in front of you. They give you the stuff, and you put your own stuff in it. The Funky Griddle is where it's at if you want a pancake experience when you're in Nashville. So,
my goodness, that is so cool! I can't wait. That's on my list. That's on the top of my list. Next time I come to Nashville. That is so cool. I love it. Well, I like buckwheat pancakes with peanut butter.
That's
peanut the way I like it.
On pancakes.
I like peanut butter, kind of melting the peanut butter to where it almost kind of gets syrupy with some honey drizzled on top and chocolate chips. That's how I roll with my pancakes.
Interesting.
So, and I really don't know that I have found a restaurant that I feel like does it the very best. We've already kind of talked about Waffle House, and waffles are different than pancakes, but Waffle House is just my tried and true number one. So
you can't go wrong with an awful waffle that's not awful.
That's right.
Well, buckle up, guys and gals. Craig Fry, I love his heart. It's wild. He's my neighbor. His church is actually right next to my church.
Wow.
I just found this out at the D6 conference. He was like, we're neighbors. I was like, really? He just recently moved to pastoring that church. And I have been a part of a CLC group before in the past, and it is a wonderful organization, been great to me. So I hope that you find Craig and his ministry at least half as beneficial as it has been in my life, because he is a true treasure to men's ministry, to discipling guys. So love to hear his input and insight. So take a listen to Craig, and we will see you on the other side of this interview. Enjoy it.
Are you concerned about your church's future? Will it serve another generation? The Bible says He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and yet we often only know how to connect to Abraham. Let D6 help you connect with each generation. Your kids and grandkids are counting on you. D6 comes from the principles of Deuteronomy 6 and helps what happens in church also happen at home. Curriculum you can trust. Discipleship that connects.
Today I am joined by Craig Fry. Craig Fry has served as a youth minister, college minister, minister of pastoral care, senior pastor, and chief of operations at a textile plant. He is currently the president and CEO of CLC, a men's discipleship ministry that has influenced men in 158 cities and 2 Canadian provinces. Through CLC, men are equipped to be leaders in their home, church, business, and community through transparent relational discipleship. Craig, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So I'm interviewing you, but our other interviewer, Casey Pontius, is a relative of yours.
Yes, she's my niece.
And yet she threw you over to me. How does that make you feel to know that she was not willing to interview you?
When she was a child, I forgot her birthday one time, and she's never forgiven me for that. So, you know, you're supposed to forgive. The Bible says you're supposed to forgive, but I think Casey missed Sunday school that day. So that's what happened.
And I know people are probably assuming that she's like sitting here while we're saying this and laughing. She's not around.
No, we can talk bad about her all we want.
She can hear this later. But I just wanted to make that point known that she said she was not interviewing you and that there was no way, no how this was happening. However, I will say she did interview you previously, and that interview can also be found one of our D6 podcast episodes. So check that one out. The reason I'm interviewing you today is we are talking about men.
Right.
And so it just makes natural sense for me to be here today. But we're specifically talking about where are the men in the church. I want to read a quote from you. You said, "Men are the absent voices in many local churches. Despite the biblical challenge to lead, few men are willing to step up to the opportunity." Now, it doesn't seem like it's always been like this. What has happened?
We can blame culture. But if we blame culture, I think we need to blame not just the popular culture, we also need to blame the church culture. I think that men have been overlooked in recent decades, and men are noticing that they're overlooked. And we can go into detail about that if you'd like, but I think that's absolutely the case.
Yeah, I'd love for you to elaborate more on that because that's really important. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, some stats. The average North American church is 61% female. And the data is very clear that the denominations that have the fewest number of men involved are now in decline. And there is no exception to that rule. So the church has overlooked men and has done so to their own detriment. One other that I think is very fascinating and sad at the same time is that if a father is involved in church life, 2 out of 3 of the children in the home will stay connected as a worshiper. But if a father is not involved in church, and I mean not involved at any level, then that number is reduced to only 1 child in 50.
Wow. Can you repeat both of those again? Because I don't want our listeners to just gloss over this. I want them to have a chance to write this down if they've got a pen in hand, because that's mind-blowing to me.
Sure. Any denomination that has a preponderance of female as opposed to male, and North American church is made up on average of 61% females. Every place where that is currently true, every denomination where that's true, that denomination is in decline, and there are no exceptions to that. And then the second stat that I mentioned was that if a father is involved in church life, and I mean regularly involved, then 2 out of 3 children in that home will stay connected as a worshiper. However, if a father is not involved in church, and I mean not at all, then that number is reduced to only 1 in 50.
Wow. So if my math is correct, we're talking about the difference between like 67% and 2%.
Correct.
I would have never thought it would have been that far apart. Like that scale is mind-blowing to me.
It really is.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this seems like a really big deal. It is a really big deal. What ramifications might this have on future generations and even generational discipleship if things don't get turned around?
It's cataclysmic. Men are created to lead in home, church, business, community. So are women. But if you take out 50% of your target audience, you're going to suffer. That's just a standard business principle. Everyone understands that. Church is not a business, obviously, but we have lost sight of the target audience. If a church says we want to reach men, you have to be very intentional in reaching men. I'll give you an example. 3 questions. Think about your local church and ask yourself about the decor of your facility, the decorations in your facility. What worship songs do you use in your corporate worship? And what kind of service opportunities do you have? And I can almost guarantee you that the answer to those 3 questions will lean toward the feminine side. Churches are decorated in a feminine way. That's either intentional or unintentional, but it's true. You are not going to go into the average church and see a deer head or a gun rack on the wall. No, you're going to see pastel colors. You're going to see quilts. You're going to see flower arrangements on a nice table. Okay, that's all good, but what you have basically said to men unintentionally is, this is not for you. The songs that we sing. If you're not careful, some of the songs that we sing sound like Jesus is my boyfriend, as opposed to Jesus is a mighty warrior and the conqueror of the universe. Service opportunity. This is where men are most likely to be involved in church life, interestingly. Because when you're talking about service opportunities, you are talking about things typically that you do with your hands, even more than your heart. So a service opportunity such as changing the oil for a single mother, changing their car, changing the tires, changing the oil, that sort of thing, building a home for the homeless, a missions project where you're building a school. Men connect with that. That's uniquely masculine because now it's grunt work and men don't mind that. If you're going to have a quilting bee, men are probably not going to show up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you talked about men in that leadership role, and there are so many definitions floating around today about what manhood truly is. How would you define biblical manhood?
Biblical manhood, first of all, is not, it does not mean you're a tyrant. It doesn't mean you're a bully. It doesn't mean you adopt the my way or the highway type philosophy. You're a servant. You may be a verbal servant. You may be an aggressive servant, but you are a servant. And to really draw from a biblical analogy, you are a bond servant. A bond servant, as you probably know, is somebody who signed up for the job. It's not forced labor. Mm-hmm. You volunteered to be a father. You volunteered to be a husband. And there are expectations for that role.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking about this topic. Don't go anywhere.
Did you know that because of D6 Heroes, Randall House and D6 Family are able to equip families far and wide in the area of generational discipleship? Due to the financial gifts of both individuals and churches, D6 curriculum has been translated into multiple languages and distributed across the globe, including restricted access countries for use in the underground church. In short, because of the financial gifts of individuals like you, moms and dads all over the world can pass their faith to the next generation of believers. Would you consider becoming a D6 hero? A D6 hero is an individual who invests their financial resources in the ministry of Randall House and D6 Family to ensure that believers can transfer their faith through the church and home. Please visit d6hero.com to join the ranks of our heroes and to explore other areas where your financial investment can have an impact.
We're back, and we're talking to Craig Fry, and we're talking about where the men are in the church. Craig, I want to ask you, what can the church do to start getting men more engaged?
You have to be intentional, and you have to understand your target audience. So in understanding men, there are several things that come to the forefront. First of all, men, and I'm going to brush with broad strokes. This is not true of every man, but it's true for the majority of men. Most men are competitive. Most men are looking for their place in the organization. Where am I in the pecking order, so to speak? That's important to a man. Secondly, men are information gatherers. I believe every man has a so what meter in his heart. And he'll ask, without asking out loud, why am I here? What is the purpose of this meeting? What are the expectations? Where do I fit? Do I have a role in this? Third, and this is very important, is that men are resistant to vulnerability because we have an innate desire for image management. And so built into that, this is the formula that will reach men in a church. And there are 4 parts to it. Time leads to trust. Trust leads to transparency. Transparency leads to transformation. I don't know any church leader that would say, I'm not really interested in men's lives being transformed. Every single church leader I've ever met says, I want men in this church to have transformed lives. Well, you can't jump into that.
Yeah.
You have to follow the process. Start with time. Let me press in a little bit there. The once-a-month pancake breakfast, guess what's accomplished at the once-a-month pancake breakfast for men? You ate a lot of pancakes. That's it. Nobody's life was transformed. Well, we're going to have an inspirational speaker. We got this pro baseball player. He's going to come and tell us about his walk with Jesus. Okay, I'll show up if I like baseball and if I like sports. That's great. And I'm inspired for an hour and a half, and that's great. But my life isn't transformed. Life transformation only happens with men when we spend time with other men. Iron sharpens iron. That takes time. You're not going to do it in 6 weeks. You're not going to do it in 9 weeks. It has to be longer term than that. And if I spend enough time with you and I learn that I can tell you stuff that you don't tell other people, then I start to trust you. So time leads to trust. If I trust you, I'm going to open up even more. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you stuff I wouldn't tell anybody else. We're going to talk about what keeps me awake at night. We're going to talk about the things that drive me passionately toward Jesus. Yeah. And I don't just share that with people walking down the street.
Yeah.
And if you prove that you are a person I can trust and I can open up to, and we do life together and we walk shoulder to shoulder, then we're both going to be transformed.
Well, what would you say to the man who says, I agree with you 100%. I'm on board with everything you're saying right now. I want to step up and lead, but I'm shy. I'm an introvert. I'm really apprehensive about this. I'm really not comfortable with being in the spotlight and being a leader. What wisdom would you offer to them?
That guy is perfect for what we just described. Here's the fatal flaw in trying to reach men. We think macro, and then we think micro. We think, let's get a whole bunch of guys together for this big whiz-bang event, and then we're going to divide into smaller groups and really do battle for Jesus. That rarely, if ever, works. You need to start the other way. Here's what you need to do. Identify the men in your church who are already leaders. They've already risen to their top. They are men's men. Find those guys and say, look, what do you need to recruit 3 or 4 friends? You have friends. I know you got 3 or 4 of them. Go and recruit those men, and then go deep with one another. That small group of 4 or 5 guys is magic. That group needs to be a safe place where secrets are shared, confidences are kept. Those 4 guys, they're going to be so energized. They're going to walk so deep with Jesus. And then those guys are going to go out and recruit other guys and form other groups of 4, 5, 6. How does that affect the church? It affects the church exponentially as those small groups start to become macro groups. So instead of starting with 500 guys and then whittling down to groups of 5, start with a group of 5 and move from there.
Well, as we wrap up, I want to kind of throw a question out there that's going to kind of like flip everything around a little bit. But we know there are many moms out there who are the primary spiritual influencers in the home because the husbands either won't step up or maybe they're absent. What encouragement can you offer to the moms and these women out there who are leading the charge?
First of all, my heart goes out to those women. They are heroes in my book. Mm-hmm. This is a hard task. I would say pray that God would bring to the forefront men that can challenge your children, shepherd your children, lead your children, and at the same time understand that if you are forced into the position of leadership in the home as the mom, you are not second class, you are not less than. God will use you.
Yeah.
But it's you and Jesus working together on behalf of your children. So don't think that you've lost the battle. No, you have not. There are men in your church, there are men in the community that would be more than willing to come alongside you and support that effort.
Well, Craig, I thank you so much for sharing this. This is such a charge and an encouragement for men to step up, to be leaders. I keep going back to those numbers, the 2/3 and the 1 out of 50. That's going to stick with me for a long time because of the difference between that. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, I am so thankful for Craig. And to be honest with you, when he started the interview with his statistics, I don't know about you, Josh, but those statistics had my jaw dropping. 2/3. He said, first of all, the statistics of North American churches are 61% female, which I thought was very interesting. And that 2/3 of kids' fathers involved in church life will stay connected to churches as worshipers, active worshipers. And if the father's not involved in church, it's 1 out of 50. I don't know about you, but that just makes my jaw drop.
Staggering. I think he used the word cataclysmic, the trend of men falling away from the church. And that statistic, he said it and I had to pause. And when I wrote it down, I just thought, but then it was mind blowing. But then I look at families of men I know that are involved personally in our church, and I look at their kids and they are involved. I look at the few men that we have that serve in preschool. Every one of their kids are involved in church. It's hard to get men to serve in children's ministry for a lot of churches. And we have a great number of men who serve, and I look at their kids and I think that they are, most of them are still plugged in. I think it goes to speak to the truth of that. But the 1 in 50, wow. One of the things that I really took away that he said he was referring to biblical manhood and said, we are to be a servant. When you think of manhood, you think of macho and heroic, but really, we're called to be servants, and not just servants, but he said bond servants. Like when you become a husband or a dad, you sign up for that role, and there are expectations that come with that role. So you need to be intentional and embrace that role and understand that it is your duty, to not only God, but your family when you sign up for that. So I love the fact that you do that by being a servant, though. That it's not the bully, my way or the highway. I said so, submit and obey, all that, although a lot of that is biblical. But I think when you seek to, at least in a marriage or even as a father, when you seek to be a giver of love, first and foremost, to serve, then you know the true joy of receiving. As Scripture says, better to give than to receive. You see that played out when you truly submit to God and his ways and his will above your own.
I love that. And I'm going to tell you, his 4 T's in discipleship, when discipling men, that's not just for men, that's for everybody. That's everybody. For children, teenagers, young adults, every stage, senior adults.
Everybody in the club getting the 4 T's.
Everybody. Yes, I love it. So I want to just reiterate these 4 T's. He says, first and foremost is time. You've got to put in time, and time leads to trust. I can't emphasize that more than the time leads to trust. Trust leads to transparency. If they trust you, they will be vulnerable with you. So time leads to trust. Trust leads to transparency. And when we can be transparent, that's when transformation starts to happen. Vulnerability breeds transformation. And let me just also say, vulnerability breeds vulnerability. If you're discipling, Josh, you probably have moments where you could speak about this when you're meeting with a group of, young dudes, and you're sitting at the table, and when you're vulnerable, how that starts to unlock vulnerability in other men or other teenagers. You just think about that.
That's people. That's across the board, not just dudes. In any
right.
circumstance, it's like somebody's got to break the ice.
That's
and
right.
as a leader, you got to go ahead and let the cracks be shown. Jesus, God is made perfect in our weakness, not our strengths.
That's right.
And that transparency as it leads to transformation. For me, I will be a commercial for CLC. I went through a CLC many, many years ago, and I joined, and I'm telling you, my 3rd or 4th weekend, I had the hardest time in ministry that I ever had. I'd left a church, and I'm so thankful I had those 12 guys to walk with me. We went for 2 years, meeting once a week for 2 hours, and I could call those guys right now, and some I haven't even spoke to in a year or two, and haven't even seen in a couple have moved off, but I know that I could call them today, and they would be there for me. There is a bond that is built over time. And so I'm a proponent for CLC. And as a church leader looking to help establish men's ministry, you don't have to do it yourself.
That's right.
Get your guys plugged into CLC groups within your church. They already have the curriculum. They already have the stuff there. I think it's a great tool to use. So if you've got questions about that, be sure to reach out to Craig. I'm sure he'd be glad to help. And I'm excited about next week. Speaking of tough times, Tom Bump is going to be going and talking about finding restoration from burnout. Because if you've been in ministry for any length of time, you may have not burned out, but you smelt the smoke from it. You know what I mean? And so he has got some great insight into navigating the valleys and the mountains of ministry. So in that, we just want you to be blessed and hope that you feel encouraged. We are praying for you as you seek to make a difference in your community, in your church, through generational discipleship and connecting the church and home. God bless.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.